Writing the West. Stories and poems by Rick Stever. Read by Michael Messner and friends. Tusko. Tusko was billed as the largest elephant in captivity. He stood a tremendous 12 feet 2 inches at the shoulders and weighed 7 solid tons. Tusko was born in the wilds, but was captured and trained to be a circus elephant. During his performances, it appeared that Tusko was a mild giant, but his trainers knew there was a dark side to the big animal. The wild had never left Tusko. Once in Los Angeles, Tusko attacked and killed a lion. Another time, he went on a rampage, overturning automobiles and even derailing a boxcar before he was recaptured. On Christmas Day, 1931, Tusko was being held in a ramshackle shed at the foot of Southeast Maine in Portland, Oregon. His legs were chained to 4 posts. 2 circus employees were assigned to watch over Tusko. They claimed that without provocation, the elephant began trumpeting, shaking his massive head from side to side and tugging at the chains. He managed to break 2 of the chains, one on a front leg and one on a back leg. This allowed him room to move, and he promptly knocked down a wall. A local radio station sent a man to the scene, and his reports drew a crowd of curious people. The elephant continued to struggle. He freed his other front foot, and now, held only by one hind foot, he destroyed the shed from around him. The crowd cheered. And then, as quickly as the rage had swept over him, it subsided, and Tusko stood still, his sides heaving in and out from the exertion. Circus employees quickly placed hay and water in front of him and succeeded in refastening the chains. Never again was Tusko forced to perform in front of a circus crowd. He lived out his days in Woodland Park Zoo in Seattle. First cattle drive. Mountain man Ewing Young made himself a name and a fortune by driving the first herd of cattle overland to the Oregon country. In the fall of 1837, Young founded the Willamette Cattle Company. He selected 9 Willamette Valley settlers who had no experience herding stock to accompany him to California on a cattle buying mission. Young began purchasing cattle near San Francisco Bay, paying $3 a head until his funds were depleted. With a herd numbering nearly 800 head, they started north. But the Spanish longhorn cattle were difficult to handle, and they had to be denied water and starved into submission before the drive could begin. Rivers posed the greatest danger to the cowboys and the cattle. At the San Joaquin River crossing, the cattle refused to go into the water. Young and the drivers had to rope the cattle and drag them to the other side. This process took a full week, and nearly 100 animals were drowned. The drive continued up the long valley and over the imposing Siskiyou mountain range. Eventually, the herd was driven into the Willamette Valley, where the settlers were eager to buy cattle. Of the 800 head that started the drive, 632 survived. Young made a profit of 150% on the cattle he sold, making him the wealthiest man in the Oregon country. The cattle belonging to Young were allowed to run wild into the foothills of the Coast Range. Upon his death, there was no one to care for the cattle. They multiplied and within a few years became so troublesome to the settlers, frightening and chasing women and children, they were hunted and slaughtered for the meat. Ghost dance. Come, friend. Sit beside my campfire on this Northwest stage, and hear me spin my yarns of days when natives roamed free and wild, witnessed an ice age as it came and went, and then mountains exploded with fire, lava flowing like red-hot rivers. You shall hear of Oregon Trail pioneers, their misguided claim of manifest destiny, as well as those who now take center stage spouting the same tired rhetoric of dominance. The tempting bride of growth and progress at any cost, comes to our doorstep. She twirls on stage in a lovely white gown and theatrically falls to the floor in dishonor. The valiant hero appears, dressed in an insincere cloak. A developer, construction worker, attorney, banker, to lift the willowy bride into brawny arms. From stage left and right, dancers in feathers emerge, wispy ghosts in the shimmering heat and smoke. Twirling, leaping, reaching high, their backs as straight as a book now being written of evolution and revolution, as we forgive the old actors for dying and leaving all this to us. Sheep shooters. It was a pastoral scene. Warm spring rain had painted the high desert with soft hues, and a large band of sheep was wandering over the landscape, nibbling on shoots of fresh grass. The herder tended his campfire and poured another cup of coffee. One of his dogs perked its ears and barked. The herder turned and skylined on the low rolling hill. He saw 11 riders moving in his direction. Their faces were blackened to hide their identities, and they were armed with rifles, pistols, and clubs.
Grab a handful of sky!
The herder quickly complied. He was led to a scrub juniper. His hands were tied to the tree, and a gunny sack was slipped over his head. It was just as well he did not have to witness what transpired next, although the sounds were unmistakable. Gunshots popping rhythmically, sheep bleating, dogs barking. For the 11 strangers, it was like a party in a shooting gallery. The sheep scattered, and the men continued firing rifles until the sheep were out of range. Then they rode after them, running down small bunches and firing pistols, or leaning low in the saddle and swinging clubs at individual animals. And then it grew quiet again. Very quiet. The herder worked himself free and pulled the bag off his head. A grisly sight lay before him. Dead and dying sheep everywhere. What happened that day in 1903 near eastern Oregon's Benjamin Lake was the worst sheep slaughter in the history of the high desert. A total of 2,400 sheep were killed. And for years after, the bleached bones lay as mute testimony to the war waged between cattlemen and sheepmen for supremacy on the desert grasslands. Fishing trip. One beautiful day in the fall of 1893, Willie Turner and Jack Cavanis kissed their mothers goodbye and rode out of town towards a secret mountain lake to spend an entire week camping and fishing. Willie and Jack rode horseback into the foothills, and their dogs trailed along. After a long, steep climb, they topped out on a ridge overlooking a sparkling blue lake tucked into the folds of a timbered valley. They galloped off the hill and raced to see who would be the first to cut a willow pole and get his line in the water. Before they got around to setting camp, they had a heavy stringer of fish, more than enough for dinner. Their luck held for the next several days. They ate fish at every meal. In fact, they were getting tired of the steady diet, and when a deer wandered near camp, they shot it and feasted on venison steaks. That night, they were awakened by the dogs, and it was evident from the way they were barking, growling, and snarling that a wild animal was trying to reach the meat hanging in a tree. In the pale light of the new day, the boys found the carcass of the deer missing and tracks of a huge mountain lion in the soft dirt. They saddled the horses, grabbed their rifles, and turned the dogs loose. The dogs took off through the timber, and in less than a minute were barking excitedly on a hot trail. The big cat, with his belly full of meat, ran a short distance and treed. He lay stretched on a high limb, hissing and taking swipes at the dogs as they bayed and leaped in the air. Willie and Jack reached the scene and fired their rifles simultaneously. The mountain lion tumbled out of the tree. He was one of the biggest cats ever killed. From the tip of his nose to the tip of his tail, he measured 10 feet, 7 inches. You've been listening to Writing the West. The stories and poetry in this podcast are by Rick Stieber and appear in books by him. Log on to www.rickstieberauthor.com to find out more. This program was produced by Michael Messner by permission of the author. Special thanks to Michael Tucker and Art Shingler. Thank you for listening.